Amid the glittering skyline of Manhattan, the elite gather at a restaurant where a single appetizer can cost more than an average mortgage payment. One evening, Michael Davenport, a smug millionaire with an ego as lofty as his net worth, walks in, expecting to be treated like royalty. A young waitress named Sophia greets him with polite warmth, but his response is a frigid dismissal. When he finally slaps down a single penny for a tip intended as the ultimate insult, he believes he's put her in her place. Little does he know, the woman he has humiliated is no mere waitress, and she's about to turn his entire world upside down. The neon glow of Manhattan in late evening cast a mosaic of lights across the busy streets. Yellow cabs jockeyed for position, tourists craned their necks to admire towering skyscrapers, and the well-heeled citizens swept into private clubs or Michelin-starred restaurants. The wealthy enclaves of the Upper East Side and Midtown bustled with the usual swirl of designer handbags, custom suits, and discreet security details. In the heart of this glitzy maze stood La Chateau Lumière, a storied restaurant known for its lavish interior and exclusive clientele. Renovated from a 19th-century brownstone, it boasted marble floors, gilded sconces, and an imported crystal chandelier rumored to have once hung in a European royal palace. Reservations were typically booked months in advance, and anyone dining there was considered a player on the city's ever-shifting chessboard of influence. It was here that 32-year-old Sophia Whitmore began her new shift. Slipping into her crisp black uniform, she steeled herself for another demanding evening. In some ways, she was like every other server, keeping her posture perfect and her smile at the ready, greeting the city's elite with impeccable manners. But if one looked closely, there was a certain confidence in her bearing that hinted at something more. She moved gracefully, exuding an almost regal aura that set her apart from her colleagues. On the surface, Sophia was but a waitress hustling to make ends meet, ensuring she delivered dishes on time and wineglasses never ran dry. Underneath, however, lay a story that no one at La Chateau Lumière quite knew. Not the other servers, not even the owner, Karen Friedman, who had hired her for her extraordinary poise and unflappable calm. Indeed, Karen Friedman, a well-connected philanthropist known to rub shoulders with figures like Michael Bloomberg and Jamie Dimon, had been so impressed by Sophia in their brief interview that she'd skipped the usual references and put her on the floor immediately. She simply couldn't resist that quiet confidence. Sophia had her reasons for being secretive. She was here not just to earn a paycheck, but to observe, to learn, almost as if she was studying the city's power brokers from the inside out. Each night, she noted the rhythms of conversation, the alliances formed over $300 centuries, and the tensions that flared when champagne was late to the table. Serving taught her more about human nature than any boardroom meeting ever could. As the clock neared 8 p.m., the restaurant was abuzz with its usual swirl of gossip and indulgence. A senator's aide was quietly slipping in for a corner table. A Hollywood starlet glided past the foyer, shielded by an entourage. And then, in walked a man whose name alone could halt the hushed conversations mid-sentence: Michael Davenport. Michael Davenport was the scion of an old money family from Connecticut. His fortune, estimated to be in the high hundreds of millions, stemmed partially from a chain of luxury hotels, an investment firm, and several tech startups he'd recently poured money into. Despite being only in his mid-30s, he carried himself with an air of aristocratic pride, as though the entire world were his rightful inheritance. He swept into La Chateau Lumière, flanked by his friend and business advisor Russell Klein, and an up-and-coming model named Alessandra Benoit. The maitre d', recognizing him instantly, offered a deep bow. "Mr. Davenport, what a pleasure," the maitre d' toned, leading them through the main dining area. Heads turned. People recognized power when they saw it. Michael wore a charcoal suit tailored to perfection, his gold cufflinks subtly twinkling in the low light. "Where's Karen Friedman tonight?" Michael asked in a clipped tone. "I was hoping to discuss some philanthropic collaboration with her." "I believe Miss Friedman is out for the evening," the maitre d' replied politely. "But she will be informed that you came by." Michael exhaled, only partially hiding his annoyance. "Fine." He slid into a plush booth that overlooked the expanse of the dining room, ironically the most visible spot for other patrons to see him. He liked it that way, being noticed, admired, perhaps even envied, Sophia observed from a distance. She recognized Michael Davenport instantly. After all, she was no stranger to the tabloids that fawned over his jet-setting lifestyle, nor was she ignorant of his status in the city's social circles. He was known for big spending and bigger egos, a man whose philanthropy, ironically, was overshadowed by his condescending behavior toward those he deemed irrelevant. Taking a steadying breath, Sophia gathered herself. She was assigned to that very section tonight, and so she made her approach. "Good evening, Mr. Davenport. Welcome to La Chateau Lumière," she said, meeting his eyes with a neutral smile. "My name is Sophia, and I'll be your server. May I start you off with a drink?" He barely glanced at her. "Bring me your best scotch on the rocks," he said, his attention already drifting toward his phone. "You," he pointed at Russell, "still want that Bordeaux?" Russell, nearly overshadowed by Michael's presence, nodded timidly. Alessandra tossed her hair and cast a vaguely polite smile at Sophia. "I'll have a flute of your finest champagne," she declared in a breathy tone. Sophia jotted down the orders. She'd encountered difficult customers before, but the undercurrent in Michael's manner suggested this might be more than the usual arrogance. Something about the tension in his shoulders, the hardness in his gaze, told her he was not a man to cross. As she walked away, she could already feel the beginnings of an uneasy night. The evening surged forward. Entrees were ordered, fresh lobster for Alessandra, a rare Wagyu steak for Michael, and roasted pheasant for Russell. Every so often, Sophia would approach and discreetly top off glasses or inquire if the food was to their liking. She noticed that while Alessandra seemed happy enough with the decadent meal, Russell was jumpy, likely anxious about some looming business deal. Michael himself maintained a perpetual aura of impatience, as though everything and everyone needed to move faster to accommodate him. At one point, Sophia overheard a snippet of conversation. Michael was discussing a new luxury resort he planned to develop in partnership with some West Coast real estate magnate. The resort would cater to the ultra-rich, boasting private beaches, high-end boutiques, even personal butlers for each guest. The numbers he tossed out were staggering. Billions in potential revenue, millions in necessary investment. Russell tried to interject with cautionary notes about environmental regulations, but Michael brushed them aside. "I'll handle the red tape," he said in a low, confident tone. "Once they see the money I'm bringing in, they'll back off." Sophia carefully refilled his scotch. He didn't even thank her. His expression remained locked on Russell, as if perpetually in the middle of a high-stakes negotiation. She wondered if part of this show was just that, a performance, meant to reaffirm his power in front of whomever was present. The night wore on, and tension between the group began to crackle. Alessandra appeared bored, scrolling through social media on her phone. Russell's presence felt overshadowed, and he kept glancing at his watch. Finally, the conversation took a sharp turn. "So, Russell," Michael said, "have you managed to secure that meeting with James Patterson at Redwood Capital for next week?" Russell hesitated. I tried, but Patterson's assistant said he's out of town. And then I heard from Karen Friedman's people she also needs that proposal." Without Friedman's support, we might have trouble pitching Redwood Capital. Michael's eyes flared with anger. I told you to handle it. These delays are unacceptable. Hearing Karen Friedman's name pricked Sophia's attention. Friedman was La Chateau Lumiere's owner, a philanthropic heavyweight known to be incredibly selective about her partnerships. Sophia knew Friedman because Friedman was a close friend of her own family, but that was a secret she never shared with her co-workers or customers. At least, not yet. Michael raked his fingers through his hair, then shoved the plate aside, half-eaten steak still glistening under the overhead light. "Enough," he snapped. "I'm done with dinner." Sophia stepped forward softly. "Is everything okay with your meal, Mr. Davenport?" "Would you like me to box it?" "No," he said, cutting her off, his tone icy. "Just bring the check." Swallowing, Sophia nodded. She vanished for a moment and returned with a sleek leather folio containing the bill. Michael flipped it open, and for a moment, a faint smirk tugged at his lips. The total was large, but he paid without flinching clearly. Money was no object. Yet, as he scribbled on the tip line, a cruel gleam lit his eyes. Slowly, with all the dramatic flair of a man making a grand statement, he withdrew a single penny from his jacket pocket, already preset for this insulting gesture. He placed it gently atop the leather folio, tapping it twice to ensure it caught Sophia's eye. Russell paled at the sight of the penny. Even Alessandra looked up from her phone, raising an eyebrow. Sophia, for her part, felt her heart pound. She wasn't new to rude customers, but this was a step beyond normal arrogance. It was a deliberate, belittling act. Michael rose from his seat, adjusting his cufflinks. "Thank you for your service," he said, voice dripping with condescension. He offered Sophia a sarcastic grin before turning on his heel. Alessandra trailed after him, stifling a stunned laugh, while Russell avoided Sophia's gaze altogether. Shame coloring his cheeks, Sophia stared at the penny, frozen. She'd faced rudeness, anger, even mild harassment in her time, but something about Michael's calm, calculated disrespect made her blood boil. Little did he know that the meek waitress he had just humiliated had ties that ran deeper than he could ever imagine. A wave of hush spread across the dining room as Michael left. The rest of the staff cast sympathetic looks at Sophia, who carefully closed the leather folio, the single penny clinking inside. She excused herself and walked briskly toward the kitchen, ignoring the stares of diners who'd witnessed the spectacle. In a discreet back hallway, she leaned against a wall, trying to steady her breathing. She was furious, humiliated, and yet a tiny part of her felt an unexpected thrill. This was exactly the kind of raw, unfiltered behavior she'd come here to study, arrogance born of unchecked power. But nothing had prepared her for the sting of being dismissed as worthless. Just as she was gathering herself, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out to see a message from Gerald Whitmore, her grandfather. The text read, "Sophia, Karen Friedman told me she's seen you handling the busiest shifts at the restaurant with grace. Proud of you. We'll talk soon about next month's philanthropic event. Love, grandfather." Sophia's lips tightened. Gerald Whitmore was one of the city's major philanthropists, a man whose generosity had funded education grants and community centers across the country. He was also fiercely private, rarely stepping into the spotlight himself. Her family, the Whitmores, were similarly low profile, yet extremely influential. Even Karen Friedman, despite being well connected, had deeper respect for the Whitmore family's approach, quiet but transformative giving. The reason Sophia had taken this waitress job was to understand firsthand how people behaved when they believed themselves superior. It was part of her personal journey, a vow she made to herself in college. I will never lose touch with the realities faced by everyday people. For the last few months, she had quietly paid her dues at La Chateau Lumiere, learning the ropes, forging a deeper empathy for those in service roles. and confirming her belief that wealth did not entitle one to degrade others. If Michael Davenport knew she was Gerald Whitmore's granddaughter, a fact that would place her in the same philanthropic circles he desperately wanted to court, he would surely be singing a different tune. But for now, he remained blissfully ignorant, and ironically, that ignorance might become his downfall. The rest of Sophia's shift passed in a blur. She tried her best to remain composed, but the sting of that one penny tip lingered like a bruise. One of her fellow servers, Anna Morales, offered a comforting pat on the shoulder as they finished cleaning up for the night. "Don't let it get to you," Anna murmured. "We get jerks sometimes." Sophia offered a tight smile. "It's not the money," she said quietly. "It's the principle." Anna nodded sympathetically. Everyone in the service industry understood that. The difference, of course, was that Sophia had the means to retaliate if she chose. That fact alone weighed heavily on her mind as she gathered her things to leave. Outside, the night air was brisk, the streetlights flickering across the sidewalk. As she started walking, she noticed a figure leaning against a sleek black town car parked near the restaurant's entrance. It was Russell Klein, looking sheepish and uncomfortable. "Excuse me, Sophia?" he called softly. His posture was awkward, like a schoolboy forced to apologize. She stopped, crossing her arms. "Can I help you?" He straightened, clearing his throat. Wanted to say I'm sorry for what Michael did back there. That was uncalled for." Sophia's expression softened just a fraction. "You don't need to apologize on his behalf." Russell grimaced. "Well, I kinda do. I'm part of his team, his friend. I know how he can be. He's under pressure about this Redwood Capital deal, and Friedman's support is crucial. But that doesn't excuse how he treated you." Sophia felt a surge of conflicting emotions. A part of her wanted to remain cold, to reject any olive branch. Yet Russell seemed genuine, a man caught in the crossfire of someone else's arrogance. "I appreciate it," she finally said. Russell hesitated, glancing at his shoes before looking back at her. "Look, I can't stand by what he did, but I can't walk away from him either. I owe him a lot. I just wanted to let you know, not everyone around him is okay with that behavior." Sophia's gaze softened. Perhaps Russell was a decent man, overshadowed by a toxic personality. "Thank you, Russell," she said gently. She paused, weighing whether to say more. Finally, she offered a small nod. "Good night." Without waiting for a response, she headed off into the darkness. Russell watched her go, his brow knitted with worry. He wondered if Michael Davenport had finally stepped on the wrong person's toes, someone who might not be as powerless as she seemed. The next morning found Michael Davenport at his lavish penthouse, overlooking Central Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, and the interior decor minimalist, yet opulent, spotlighted various modern art pieces from rising talent. He was sipping espresso, scanning business reports on his tablet, when Russell let himself in. "Morning," Russell said, clearing his throat. He set down a paper cup of coffee on a marble countertop, which Michael ignored. Michael's eyes never left his tablet. "How's Friedman responding to our request for a meeting?" he asked. Russell exhaled. "Karen Friedman's office said she's still reviewing your proposal. No commitments yet." Michael frowned. "I need Friedman's endorsement if Redwood Capital is going to feel comfortable investing in my resort. She's known to be picky, but once she blesses a project, the rest of the money flows in like water." He set the tablet aside and turned to Russell. "You sure you explained how big this deal could be?" "I did," Russell replied carefully, "but Friedman is known for her philanthropic sensibilities. She invests in projects that demonstrate environmental responsibility and community benefits. She might question whether a lavish resort for the ultra-wealthy aligns with her values." Michael snorted. "Values, right. Everyone has a price, Russell. We just need to find Friedman's." Before Russell could reply, a phone on the countertop buzzed. Michael grabbed it. A new message flashed across the screen, apparently from Karen Friedman's assistant. Miss, Friedman will not be available to meet this week. We will follow up regarding possible dates next month. Michael's lip curled in annoyance. Next month? That's too late. Redwood Capital needs to see Friedman's involvement sooner than that. He slammed the phone down. Unbelievable. Russell braced himself. He suspected that Friedman might already be cooling to the idea, perhaps from hearing about Michael's public behavior. It wasn't unusual in high society for word of arrogance or ill treatment to spread like wildfire. Michael began pacing, launching into a tirade about how Friedman was a hypocrite who only pretended to care about philanthropic causes while rubbing elbows with the city's biggest names. Russell, sensing an opening, decided to gently mention the incident at La Chateau Lumière. About last night, he ventured, you might want to consider that. Michael cut him off. Let's not rehash that, Russell. It's done. She was a nobody waitress. I was making a point. Russell took a deep breath. You might be surprised at how fast gossip travels. People talk, especially in those circles. Michael's head whipped around. Are you implying Friedman might hear about a single penny tip? That's ridiculous. She has better things to do. But Russell's cautious look spoke volumes. Michael clenched his jaw. In the rare event that Friedman did find out and took offense, it could jeopardize everything. He silently vowed that if Friedman was indeed pulling away from the deal, he'd find a way to bring her back. He always did. Money had a way of persuading people. He just had to sweeten the pot. Meanwhile, across town, Sophia was in her small apartment. Although her family was wealthy, she chose to live modestly, a personal philosophy she developed after seeing how easily money could corrupt one's perspective. She believed in experiencing life on her own terms. Photos of her travels, volunteering in Africa, studying in Europe adorned her walls, reminding her of the broader world beyond Manhattan's gilded bubble. Her phone pinged with an email notification. It was from Karen Friedman herself. Sophia, thank you for your continued efforts at La Chateau Lumière. I've been hearing great feedback from customers and staff alike. I'd like to invite you to a private benefit gala I'm hosting next week. Gerald Whitmore will be there, along with several other important figures. It might be an opportune moment for you to step out from behind the restaurant's uniform, if you're comfortable. Please let me know. Best, Karen Friedman. Sophia's heart fluttered. She'd been to many galas in her life, usually at the side of her grandfather, but this one felt different. Karen Friedman was subtly nudging her to reveal more of who she really was to attend, not as a waitress, but as the Whitmore family member she truly was. The question was whether she was ready to blur those lines. Yet the memory of Michael Davenport's penny tip still stung. Part of her wanted to remain the anonymous observer a while longer, but perhaps Friedman's event was a chance to assert herself and maybe, just maybe, teach Michael Davenport a lesson if he happened to be there. She typed a brief reply, accepting the invitation. Within minutes, Friedman responded with further details. The date, the dress code black tie, and the charitable cause they were supporting: women's education and entrepreneurship in Southeast Asia. The email ended with a simple line, looking forward to introducing you to some very interesting people. Sophia stared at that line for a long moment. She had an inkling that Friedman knew about her encounter with Michael Davenport. Friedman was not the type to gossip, but the city's grapevine could be powerful. Perhaps Friedman saw an opportunity to let Sophia reveal herself at just the right time, and if that's what Friedman intended, Sophia found herself more than willing to play along. At the same time, Michael Davenport found himself in an uncharacteristic predicament. Despite relentless follow-up, Friedman's office remained politely non-committal about scheduling any meeting. Redwood Capital's interest began to wane. Nothing was official, but Michael could sense the tide turning. Investors he'd once considered a sure thing started making excuses, deferring their commitments until Friedman was on board. Damn Friedman, he muttered to Russell late one afternoon in his penthouse, swirling a glass of whiskey. She's the linchpin in all this. We need her, or Redwood Capital is out. Russell nodded grimly. There's a rumor Friedman is hosting a gala next week, he ventured. Might be an opportunity to talk to her in person. Michael brightened slightly. Excellent, we'll get an invite. But Russell's next words dashed his hopes. I'm not sure we're on the guest list. Typically, Friedman's galas are exclusive. You need a personal invitation. I've asked around, none of our usual contacts can get us in this time. Michael's jaw clenched. Then I'll just show up. Russell shook his head. You can't just barge into Friedman's private event, Michael. That'd only make things worse. We need to find a legitimate way in. And so the planning began. Michael called in favors, reached out to acquaintances in Friedman's philanthropic circles, hoping for a miracle. Every lead turned up short. Friedman's gala was famously intimate. Only those with a direct or personal connection could attend. Days passed. Michael's frustration grew, fueling a sense of desperation. Finally, he discovered a faint hope. Friedman had a small staff of event organizers. If he donated a large enough sum to the gala's cause, maybe that would earn him a last-minute spot. Tapping a few philanthropic advisors, he arranged a substantial pledge, one big enough that Friedman couldn't possibly ignore. It's a gamble, Russell warned. What if Friedman sees through it as a bribe? Michael exhaled. She might, but it's my best shot. If I can corner her at the gala, show her how serious I am about philanthropic synergy, Redwood Capital might stay on board. Russell sighed, but nodded. Sometimes, working for Michael Davenport felt like riding a runaway train. All he could do was hold on and hope it didn't crash. The evening of Karen Friedman's gala arrived, and the opulent ballroom of the Astor Royale Hotel came alive with gentle strings, music, and champagne flutes clinking. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light across polished floors, and the city's social elite mingled in designer gowns and custom tuxedos. This was the kind of event where million-dollar donations were pledged with a casual flourish, and philanthropic endeavors were as much about image as about impact. Sophia Whitmore stood near the entrance, feeling a familiar tightness in her chest. She wore a flowing emerald gown, her hair swept into a stylish chignon that revealed delicate diamond studs. Gone was the black uniform of La Chateau Lumière. Tonight, she would be seen as Gerald Whitmore's granddaughter, and everyone in the room knew the Whitmore name stood for old money and impeccable philanthropic credentials. Darling, Karen Friedman greeted her with a warm hug. You look radiant, Sophia smiled. Thank you for the invitation, Miss Friedman. Karen, please, Friedman corrected gently. She guided Sophia deeper into the ballroom. Your grandfather had a previous engagement, but sends his love. He wants to hear all about tonight, Sophia nodded. She scanned the room, spotting a few familiar faces. Senator Elaine McCarthy, the real estate mogul John Patterson, father of Redwood Capital's James Patterson, and even a couple of Hollywood A-listers. She also spotted staff from La Chateau Lumière, working the event, no doubt Friedman's favorites, who were used to orchestrating large gatherings with perfect grace. Midway through the evening, Friedman stepped onto a small stage to give a welcome speech. Thank you all for coming to support women's education and entrepreneurship initiatives in Southeast Asia, she began. Tonight is about more than just raising funds. It's about creating sustainable opportunities for those who need it most. Applause rippled through the crowd. Sophia clapped politely, noting Friedman's poise. It was then that she noticed a tall figure slipping into the back of the ballroom, Michael Davenport. She felt her heart skip a beat. He was dressed in a sleek tuxedo, hair impeccably styled. He moved through the crowd, scanning faces, likely searching for Friedman. A swirl of conflicting emotions tumbled in Sophia's chest, part dread, part curiosity. Did he even recognize her? Or would he be so fixated on Friedman that he'd overlook her? It didn't take long for Friedman herself to notice Michael. Her eyes narrowed, but her public smile never faltered. She ended her speech gracefully, then stepped off the stage. Michael, seeing her descend, made a beeline in her direction. Sophia watched from a distance as Friedman and Michael exchanged pleasantries. He tried to hand Friedman a small folder, no doubt his lavish donation. Friedman's expression remained polite but cool. She gave a slight nod, accepted the folder, and moved on to greet other guests, leaving Michael standing there with a forced grin. An amused glint shone in Friedman's eyes as she caught Sophia's gaze across the room. There was a silent invitation there, an invitation for Sophia to step forward and see where this night might lead. Michael Davenport was determined to corner Karen Friedman again, but Friedman adeptly navigated the room, never lingering in one spot long enough for him to press his pitch. Feeling frustrated, he decided to sample the refreshments to calm his nerves. At the bar, he ordered a whiskey. Neat. And there, seated at a nearby lounge table, was Sophia. For a moment, Michael barely recognized her. She was dressed far too elegantly to match his mental image of the mere waitress from La Chateau Lumière. She had the poise of someone who belonged at such a gathering, conversing quietly with a pair of older women. Something about her face tugged at his memory, but he couldn't quite place it. Curiosity piqued, he approached the table. "Good evening," he said, flashing his practiced social smile. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Michael Davenport." Sophia locked eyes with him, her heart thudding. She saw the flicker of confusion in his gaze, the dawning recognition that he'd seen her somewhere before. She decided to play it cool, offering a polite nod. "Sophia," she replied simply. She extended a hand. "Sophia Whitmore." Michael took her hand, his mind racing. Whitmore. He knew that name. Everyone knew the Whitmore family for their philanthropic influence and deep pockets. He tried to connect the dots. The familiarity of her face combined with that name. Then it hit him with the force of a sledgehammer. The waitress at La Chateau Lumière. The one he'd tipped a single penny. The one who now wore an emerald gown worth more than most cars. Blood drained from his face as understanding dawned. She wasn't just any Whitmore. She had to be closely related to Gerald Whitmore, one of the biggest philanthropic figures in the city. The ramifications ricocheted in his mind. Friedman was close to the Whitmores. Redwood Capital revered them. The entire philanthropic community looked up to them. "Wait," Michael managed, swallowing hard. We've met before, haven't we?" Sophia allowed herself a small, gracious smile. "Yes, at La Chateau Lumière, where I'm a waitress." Michael's throat tightened. This was a disaster. He realized in a flash that Friedman's frosty reception might have everything to do with his treatment of Sophia. He had no idea she was part of one of the city's most influential families. Shame and panic warred within him. He forced a laugh. I didn't realize. Why were you?" Sophia's gaze never wavered. "I chose to work at La Chateau Lumière for personal reasons," she said, not offering further explanation. The older women at her side watched with raised eyebrows, sensing the tension. Desperate to save face, Michael cleared his throat. "Sophia, could we speak privately for a moment?" Sophia glanced at the older women, who nodded politely, clearly understanding they were witnessing an unfolding drama. She rose from her seat and led Michael to a quieter corner of the ballroom. He inhaled shakily. "Look, I'm sorry about that night. I wasn't myself. I was dealing with a lot of stress and—" Sophia cut him off gently. "It's not just about me, Mr. Davenport. It's about how you treat people you deem beneath you. Whether I was related to Gerald Whitmore or not, you had no right to humiliate me." He couldn't argue. He felt like a child being scolded, except the stakes were incalculably higher. "I apologize," he said, trying to sound sincere. I truly do. If you'd known who I was, you'd have treated me differently. Sophia's tone was calmly pointed. That's the problem. Michael's face burned. He'd never felt so exposed. He was losing the moral high ground in a conversation he desperately needed to control. I understand, and I regret it. A weighted pause followed. The music of the gala continued in the background, oblivious to the little drama unfolding. Finally, Sophia nodded. I appreciate the apology, she said, but I hope it's not just for my sake. She turned to go, leaving him standing there, a swirl of shame, regret, and a sinking feeling that everything he'd worked for might slip through his fingers. News of the encounter spread quickly through the gala. While no one made a public scene, whispers floated from guest to guest. Michael Davenport had disrespected Gerald Whitmore's granddaughter. Among these circles, it was social and philanthropic suicide to humiliate a Whitmore, who were among the city's most revered families for their quiet generosity. Karen Friedman, after concluding her duties as host, found Michael standing near a balcony, staring out at the night skyline. He turned as she approached, a glimmer of desperation in his eyes. Miss Friedman, he began, I hope you received my donation. I'd like to discuss. Friedman held up a hand. I did receive your donation, Mr. Davenport, and I'm sure it will be of benefit to the cause. She paused, letting the awkwardness sink in. However, your behavior toward Miss Whitmore was inexcusable. You understand that, I trust. Michael's mouth felt dry. He'd never had Friedman address him so coldly. Yes, I regret it deeply, he said. He tried to sound as remorseful as possible. I had no idea who she was. Karen Friedman's gaze hardened. If you had known, would that have made a difference? Treating her with respect shouldn't hinge on her connections or her family's name. But, she conceded with a faint sigh, that's a lesson you must learn on your own. Michael was silent, grappling with a realization. Friedman was unimpressed by wealth and status. She measured people by their ethics and empathy. He could sense Redwood Capital's interest in his resort slipping away if Friedman refused to endorse him. The empire he'd planned, worth billions, was teetering over a moral failing he hadn't even cared about until now. Miss Friedman, please. He tried again. I'm committed to doing better. If you give me a chance, Friedman offered him a polite, non-committal nod. We'll see, Mr. Davenport. Then she walked away, merging seamlessly into the crowd of supporters, leaving Michael alone with the night sky and the weight of his regrets. Across the room, Sophia spoke with longtime family friend James Patterson Sr., the father of Redwood Capital's younger CEO. Patterson Sr. was known to have a profound respect for the Whitmores, and though Redwood Capital was officially run by his son, he still held sway over its decisions. When Patterson Sr. asked about her experience at the restaurant, she recounted it politely but truthfully, not leaving out the penny tip fiasco. Patterson's face darkened with disapproval. He thanked her, kissed her hand, and promised to speak with her grandfather soon about some new philanthropic venture. Sophia had no doubt Patterson Sr. would share his disapproval of Michael Davenport's conduct with Redwood's leadership. If Michael hoped to salvage Redwood Capital's involvement, he now faced an uphill battle. The gala ended, and over the next few weeks, Michael Davenport found himself in the most precarious position of his career. Redwood Capital withdrew their tentative commitment, citing leadership concerns and a re-evaluation of the project's community impact. Friedman remained distant, not bothering to return calls or emails. Investors who once jockeyed for Michael's attention grew wary. Desperate, Michael considered rebranding the resort project to highlight sustainability and local benefits. But without Friedman's support, it all rang hollow. The philanthropic community was interconnected in ways Michael hadn't fully appreciated. Once rumors circulated that the Whitmores disapproved of him, his standing with high-profile donors collapsed like a row of dominoes. He spent sleepless nights pacing his penthouse, shouting at Russell for updates, demanding that he fix it. But Russell could do nothing. Only Michael himself could mend the damage, if at all. Then a glimmer of hope emerged in the form of an unexpected phone call from Sophia Whitmore. When he saw her name flash on his phone, his heart lurched. "Hello?" he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mr. Davenport," Sophia began. Her tone was neutral, but not hostile. "Miss Friedman asked me to pass along a message regarding a new philanthropic initiative she's launching. She'd like to gauge whether you have any genuine interest in supporting community development in the region where you plan to build your resort." Michael's hand tightened on the phone. "Yes, absolutely. I'm committed to that," he blurted. Sophia paused, as if weighing his sincerity. "There will be a meeting next week. Karen Friedman, Gerald Whitmore, and a few others will be present. The question is whether you can attend with a sincere intention to collaborate, not just for show." Michael's throat tightened. This was his last chance. "Yes," he said, "I'd be honored to attend." Sophia provided the date, time, and location, a small boardroom at Friedman's philanthropic offices downtown. Just before hanging up, she added, "Michael, you should know this isn't just about money. If you attend, come prepared to listen." He swallowed. "I will." After the call ended, Michael sank into a chair. Despite feeling relief that there was still an opening, he also felt an unfamiliar ache, shame. The conversation with Sophia had been short, but carried a moral weight that made him feel like a contrite student heading to the principal's office. The following week, Michael arrived at Friedman's philanthropic office, a sleek, modern building with a discreet entrance. The boardroom inside was bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows letting in the morning sun. Karen Friedman sat at the head of a rectangular table, flanked by Gerald Whitmore and James Patterson Sr. from Redwood Capital. A few other notable figures were also present, including a legal advisor and Friedman's chief of staff. Sophia was there, seated beside her grandfather, looking poised and confident in a navy blazer. She offered Michael a polite nod as he took a seat. Friedman began the meeting with a curt greeting, then dove into the heart of the matter. "Mr. Davenport, we're evaluating the possibility of endorsing your luxury resort, but we have significant concerns about its social and environmental impact. We would like to see a concrete plan for how you'll ensure local communities benefit." Michael cleared his throat. "I've had my team draft a revised proposal," he said, handing out documents. "It includes commitments to local hiring, environmental safeguards, and a profit-sharing component with community development programs." The group reviewed the proposals in silence. Patterson Sr. occasionally asked pointed questions about accountability measures and long-term sustainability. Gerald Whitmore inquired about educational scholarships for local youth. Friedman pressed on environmental compliance. Throughout it all, Michael responded as best he could, trying to emphasize genuine contrition and openness to feedback. Several times he glanced at Sophia, who listened quietly, occasionally taking notes. He couldn't shake the feeling that her judgment carried more weight in this room than any official title might suggest. When the questions subsided, Friedman looked at Michael with an inscrutable gaze. "Mr. Davenport, you've made significant revisions. I'm pleased to see you're taking these concerns seriously." Gerald Whitmore nodded, though his expression remained cautious. "Karen and I will consider supporting this plan, subject to a thorough third-party audit." Patterson Sr. stroked his chin. "If Friedman is on board, Redwood Capital might revisit our investment. But we'll need proof of sincerity, not just words. Michael exhaled. I understand. You'll have it. He paused, turning to Sophia. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Sophia met his gaze. Don't thank me, she said softly. Thank yourself if you truly change. With that, Friedman adjourned the meeting. It was tentative progress, but the door to redemption had been opened. As the others departed, Michael lingered to speak with Sophia. Can I walk you out? He asked, almost timidly. She nodded, and they strolled down a hallway lined with photographs of Friedman's various charitable projects, hospitals, schools, community centers. Michael seemed transfixed. They do a lot of good here, he said. Sophia nodded. They do, and so does my grandfather, in his own quiet way. They reached the building's lobby, where sunlight streamed through glass panels. Michael took a breath. I really am sorry, for everything. Sophia studied him. I believe you've taken the first steps toward making amends, but a single penny can symbolize a lot, Michael. It symbolizes disregard for someone's worth. What you do next will determine whether that penny continues to define you. He nodded, unable to find more words. She offered a faint smile and stepped outside into the bustling city street. Michael watched her leave, silently resolved to prove himself worthy of that second chance. Weeks turned into months, and slowly but surely, Michael Davenport followed through on his promises. He hired environmental consultants to ensure the resort's construction minimized ecological damage. He initiated job training programs for local residents, forging partnerships with local community colleges. Redwood Capital, impressed by Friedman's cautious endorsement, returned to the table, though Patterson Sr. insisted on strict oversight. During this time, Michael developed a newfound respect for philanthropic work. Rather than seeing Friedman and Whitmore as mere stepping stones, he began to understand their ethos. Wealth could be used to uplift, not just to glorify oneself. The tabloids noticed the shift. Articles once mocking his high-handed attitude now commented on Michael Davenport's surprising pivot to social responsibility. Some cynics labeled it a PR stunt, but those who worked closely with him, including Russell Klein, sensed something genuine was taking hold. Behind the scenes, Sophia Whitmore watched with a mix of skepticism and cautious hope. She continued her waitress shifts at La Chateau Lumière, although Karen Friedman often teased her that she'd soon be too busy if her philanthropic roles expanded. Sophia insisted on finishing the commitment she'd set for herself. I'm not done learning, she would say. One evening, as she was cleaning up after closing time, she felt a presence nearby. Turning, she found Michael Davenport standing at the threshold of the dining room. This time, no entourage, no flashy arrogance. He wore a simple suit, and there was an earnest expression on his face. May I come in? He asked. She nodded, cautious. We're about to close. I won't be long, he said, stepping forward. He set down a small velvet pouch on the table. With trembling hands, he opened it, revealing a single penny, now framed within a tiny glass case. This, he said, voice thick with emotion, is a reminder of what I used to be. Sophia stared at it. The memory flashed, his smug face, the deliberate insult. She felt the old sting but recognized a new humility in his eyes. I wanted you to have this, he continued, not as a trophy of my failure, but as a symbol of the turning point in my life. Because of that penny, I learned a lesson I should have known all along. Tears prickled the corners of Sophia's eyes. She remained silent, overwhelmed by the gesture. Michael swallowed. I understand if you'd rather never see me again. But for what it's worth, I'm grateful for this chance to change. Sophia exhaled slowly, then reached out and gently closed his hand over the framed penny. Keep it. Let it remind you every day of who you don't want to be, she said softly. And if you stay true to this new path, maybe one day it'll symbolize something else entirely. He nodded, tucking the pouch away. As he turned to leave, he paused. "Sophia, thank you." With that, he walked out, leaving her in the quiet hush of the empty restaurant, feeling a strange mixture of closure and possibility. In the following year, the once arrogant millionaire turned his reputation around. The resort project, now rebranded with an emphasis on local empowerment, became a success. Friedman and Whitmore supported it, Redwood Capital invested, and the press lauded the resort's innovative model of development. Instead of being a playground only for the rich, it was a place where community members found stable employment, educational programs, and upgraded infrastructure. Michael Davenport himself became a fixture at charitable events, not to flaunt his wealth, but to expand his philanthropic reach. He launched scholarships in partnership with Friedman's Foundation, visited the communities impacted by his project, and learned to listen more than he spoke. As for Sophia, she concluded her tenure at La Chateau Lumière on her own terms, eventually joining her grandfather's organization to spearhead new philanthropic initiatives. She never forgot the lessons learned while serving tables, the dignity of honest work, the importance of kindness toward everyone, and the humble power of empathy. From time to time, she crossed paths with Michael at board meetings or galas. Their interactions were cordial, occasionally friendly. A mutual respect replaced what once was animosity. And though the memory of that penny tip could never truly vanish, it transformed into a reminder that even the most arrogant among us can learn given the right catalyst. In this unforgettable tale, the simple act of leaving a single penny as a tip revealed the true cost of arrogance. Michael Davenport thought his wealth could shield him from consequences, but when he humiliated a humble waitress, he never suspected she was Sophia Whitmore, heiress to one of the most influential philanthropic families in the city. In the end, it wasn't just Sophia's status that forced him to confront his ways. It was her unwavering principle that everyone deserves respect. From disgrace to redemption, Michael's journey reminds us that humility, empathy, and second chances can change the course of a life and even reshape entire industries. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the value we place on each other's dignity, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories that challenge our assumptions and inspire real change. Thank you for watching, and remember, the smallest acts of kindness can make the biggest difference.